This is the lens that changed everything about how I shoot my portraits. I bought this lens as one of my first professional lenses when I started to move over to mirrorless photography. Now, I'd seen many comparison videos and I'd watched many different videos on 85 versus 50 versus 35. And I just knew that the 85 was the lens for me, and it's never left my bag ever since. When I first started shooting portraits, I was shooting on an old DSLR, which was the Canon 90D, I think it was, and that is obviously a crop sensor. Now, I did own a 35 and a 50mm for that camera, so technically I was using a 50 and an 85 if you know how the crop works. And those were the only two lenses that I had for that body at the time. Now, what I couldn't get away with was the 50mm on the crop sensor just didn't look right for some reason to me. Even though that was technically 85mm, it just didn't produce the same result that I get with my 85 1.2. Now, it's not to say that the images were bad, and I definitely preferred that over the 50mm or the 35mm, but they just didn't have that wow factor. When I moved over to mirrorless, I actually did get the 50mm 1.8, I think it is, and the 85 1.8. And that was just to get a feel for each focal length to see which one I actually preferred. And that's when I decided to make the jump and got my first L-series 85 1.2 lens. And that just changed everything immediately for me. And honestly, the separation that you get from this lens is insane. The bokeh is creamy, it's dreamy and amazing. It makes every subject feel like they're the only thing in the world or within the frame. And that compression just makes the image feel alive. And I feel like the lens does most of the creative work for me, which then only elevates my personal skills that I've built up over the years. And because I shoot boudoir and fitness portraits, the subject in both of these genres are actually the most important part of the frame. I don't want to have those busy backgrounds where it's pulling the eye away from a specific scene when you want the person to be the main subject. And that's not to say that there's not a time to use wider apertures in this genre, but a solid 80% of my work is shot on the 85 because it does its job better than any other lens I've ever used. Because the depth of field is that thin at 1.2, coupled with the R5's amazing autofocus, it just makes everything else in the frame melt away into bokeh dreaminess. And now I do own a 50mm 1.2 as well, and I do love that lens for different reasons. At 50mm, I get a bit more of the world, a bit more context to the environment. And sometimes that's exactly what a shot calls for. I sometimes even go down to 35 if I need to. But when I want my subject to be the only thing in the frame and to have no distractions whatsoever, I always reach for that 85 1.2. Now, I do want to be quite honest about something that might be a con to some. If you're shooting at 1.2, that depth of field can sometimes be an issue. Sometimes your camera will misfocus because there's such a little margin of error. It can leave the eyes feeling blurry. So some people may need to stop down to 1.4 or even 1.8 if they need to. And when I've done this, it doesn't compromise any of the amazing effects that the lens gives. But honestly, when you've got it at 1.2, the autofocus is working and the light is perfect, there's no better feeling in photography. So if you're a portrait photographer and you don't own the 85 1.2 or any other brands similar to that focal length, I would seriously consider making it your next investment. But that being said, it is the best lens that I have ever owned and probably will ever own. And it is the one lens that I would replace in a heartbeat if something did happen to it. So if you want to see this lens in action, give me a follow on Instagram, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.